Is saying the Bible says saying enough? Well, that's a question we're looking at today. Thank you for joining me on a journey of understanding when you're a Baptist pastor and your son comes out as gay. Yes, because that's a journey I've been on, and maybe you're on a journey of trying to understand Christianity, how it relates to the LGBTQ plus community. Well, I invite you to join with me. Hit subscribe if you haven't already, and hit the wee bell to be notified, and let's go sailing. Well, for this part of the journey, we're going back to the early part of the century. Oh boy, that makes me feel old. But back to the early part of the century when my son, who has now come out as gay, at that point he's actually just an infant, just a wee guy. So let's go back there, because there was an important moment that really made me think about the relationship between Christianity and LGBTQ+, and how these communities fit together, how we are to understand this. And back in those days, I had a good friend who was in the United Church in our town. And of course, I was in the Baptist Church. And you know, probably 95% of the time, if we swapped pulpits, if we showed up in each other's churches, probably our people wouldn't really notice theologically, because we're very much similar and on the same page. I knew his love for Jesus, I knew his love for the Bible, and so people probably wouldn't notice if we just swapped sermons. Well, except they would notice that mine are a lot longer, and so if we swapped sermons, they'd probably wonder why their pastor's preaching so long, but well, that's another story. But for the most part, we're on the same page, and so I remember asking him what he thought about the fact that he's in the United Church, and it's very much an affirming position for most United churches, whereas we Baptists aren't. And what he said shocked me, actually, because I assumed that he was, well, you know, I've described this journey as one sailing between, trying to figure out, there are those on the one shore that are very traditionalist, and there are those who are on the other shore who are very affirming when it comes to the LGBTQ plus community. And so I assumed that as I was on the traditionalist shore, that he would be there with me. And nope, he was absolutely on the affirming shore. And I was surprised and shocked by that. And so he said to me, actually, and this shocked me more, was it's only a matter of time before these questions come up in every denomination. And I'm like, I don't think so. I don't think we Baptists will ever be thinking through these things. And he's like, well, why not? And I'm like, well, because the Bible says. And the Bible does say, there are certain passages in the Bible, there's a few of them, that speak specifically to sexuality and about homosexuality. And actually the LGBTQ plus community, they're known as the clobber passages. But anyway, there are these passages. And so I was like, the Bible says. And so my friend says to me, well, the Bible says that, but you know, there's different ways of understanding that. And what became clear to me was that my friend was able to articulate, yes, the Bible says that, and some people understand it in a very traditionalist sense for these reasons, and others understand it in a more affirming sense for these reasons. He was able to articulate different positions, different perspectives, and he was able to articulate why he chose the perspective that he did. Now, what could I say? All I could say was the Bible says, and I could go no further. And so it became very clear to me that I had some homework to do, that I wasn't able to articulate when there are these different ways of looking at it. I didn't even know really what those different perspectives were. And I certainly couldn't articulate why one was better than the other. All I could say was the Bible says. But he could go further than that, much further than that. And I've since come to learn that, well, if you meet somebody who is a gay Christian, and there are gay Christians on the traditionalist shore, there are also gay Christians, of course, on the affirming shore. And so when you meet a gay Christian, very often they have done their homework far more than we typical Baptist pastors have, actually. Very often they've done their homework and their research, and they're digging into the Bible. You know, sometimes we assume that's when somebody takes a different perspective than us, that we say the Bible says as if they didn't know that, as if they've never read it. We say the Bible says as if they've just ripped those pages out of the Bible because they don't like it, or they've just ignored those specific passages. But that's not the case. They've actually done their homework, and they can articulate why why they're on that affirming shore as opposed to the traditionalist shore. Or there are those who can articulate why they're on the traditionalist shore and not the affirming. So there are those who have done their homework and can really articulate why they take the position they do. As for myself, at that point, all I could say was the Bible says, and it became clear to me that I had some homework to do. You know, a couple of weeks back, we looked at the question, do we have a teachable spirit, basically? I think I put it, are we listening courageously? Another way to put it is, do we have a teachable spirit? But this week, really the question is, are we being intentional in our learning? Are we really digging in? Are we really doing our homework? Because, you know, people who are LGBTQ+, they're very important. They are worth we doing our homework. So that when we're relating to them, we're not just saying the Bible says without being able to articulate why one understanding might be better than another, but also not being able to articulate why we maybe understand why they take the position they do that's different from us if they're taking a different position from us. So very important, I think, that we be doing our homework. So have we been doing our homework? And as we're doing our homework, are we doing that homework in an echo chamber? That's a good question, an important question. An echo chamber, what is that? Well, that's where everything you hear from different people as you're learning is actually just reflecting back to you what you would say. It's just reflecting back your own perspective. And sometimes we might even have people in our echo chamber telling us some of what people on the other shore are saying. But sometimes it's through their lens, through their filter. Are we actually listening to what the people on the other shore are saying? Whether we're on the traditionalist shore, we want to listen to those on the affirming shore, or the other way around. So it's really important that we get beyond our echo chambers and that we do our homework. And that came clear to me in the early part of the century that I had some homework to do. So thank you for joining me this week. Next week, we're actually going to, well, as I've been saying, I've been on the traditionalist shore. Next week, I actually kind of get in the boat and start sailing. So why? Well, we'll find out next week. So thank you for joining me in this part of the journey. I hope to see you next week as we continue sailing. So let's keep sailing. Thank you.